what are classes? So in Java you have seen classes, obviously, because you cannot do anything in Java without classes. And that sometimes is a bit confusing. And kind of when you have a function that, like in Python we had this function, say Fahrenheit, this is what we call a free function. It's a function that's not defined in the context of a class. Java, you technically can't do that, but what you can do is almost the closest to that, which is define them as a static. So a static method in a class is one that does not need a class instance, an object, to actually be called. And in Python we don't need that because we have free functions. So then we have, for example, this is a class hello. So in this particular class we're trying to just put some code here. So how does this work? We define a function, and this function is called sayIt, and it has this self parameter. This self parameter is based on the idea that if we have an object and have a function in the object, we are passing along the object so that the function knows the object it's being called on. And this happens transparently, but you need to have that object, that parameter in the function. So in Java, that's the this object. In Python, the convention is to call it self, and you actually need to declare it, name it as a parameter, rather than have that all happen transparently as happens in Java. But yes, underwater, Java just passes the object as the first parameter, so that it is accessible to the function implementation. So in this particular case we can create a greeter by calling the constructor, so the name of the class with construction parameters. In this case there's no explicit constructor, so we just get a default that doesn't do anything, and then we can call the function sayIt on that greeter. Obviously it's not actually using the self object, so it doesn't actually have any functionality where you'd say, okay, this is where I want the class for, unless you have different classes that you might want to pass into a function and then have different implementations of sayIt. So basically what a class does, it allows you to bundle data and functionality together, and that's kind of where the strength of classes is. So you can define attributes for a class to hold the state, and then you can combine things. So like if you have a coordinate, you can have an x and a y value together. Of course you can also use a tuple in Python, but sometimes it's good to define your own class, especially if something is a little bit more complex, or if you want to make your code easier to read and therefore easier to maintain and to work with. And then you can have methods that provide functionality based upon that. So it's a template. It's so kind of when we have a class, we can basically, a class is kind of a recipe how to make objects that all have the same functionality, like a cookie with a stamp, and the stamp you cut to the cookies. The cookies all work the same, they look the same, but obviously each cookie can only be eaten once. But you can have multiple cookies that look the same. So data works a little bit like a dictionary, and functionality is a function. So an example of what this looks like might be the best thing. So here we have a constructor. We have a special function, and Python has a lot of implementation through convention. So there are a lot of functions that have this underscore underscore name underscore underscore name, where that has special meanings. So look at the Python documentation or book if that's helpful for you. So in this particular case, the constructor for hello, so this initializes it, takes of course, the self parameter and a parameter called message with the default message hello world. And then you can then just assign on the self object a variable. So by naming the variable and giving the value, it automatically gets created for you. And then we assign that the message parameter. And then we can use that message parameter in the sayMessage method to print the message parameter out of the self. So it's quite a lot like Java, except that we explicitly always need to use self here rather than that having to be implicit. Like in Java, you can leave out the this dot bit. And of course, this is how you can use that. And if you have hello that has a different message, then that works. So in an adjusted parameter, we can have hello in French, and that works the same way. Except now we have this parameter and the message is now bonjour instead of hello world. So attributes are just accessed through the .message bit, like I said, and we can change that. We can actually change that also outside of our object. That's an interesting thing. So we don't really want to do it this way where we just access the attribute directly. This is possible. Python does not have this visibility thing that Java has, but it's not really great. We also don't really want to go through this whole set underscore message thing bit. It's verbose. It's a lot of typing, but worse, it is also have the bit, so it makes it harder to read what's going on. It puts a layer between your intent and your code. So instead, what you want to do is to have something that looks like greeter.message equals salut. And the way you do that is with something called properties. So Python now has the property system based upon an annotation at property that you define on a function message, and then it becomes visible as a property. So in this case, the property message does not require the parentheses, and this is a getter. What does it do? It returns the underscore message. So the underscore there is just convention. It is, we as Python community have decided that attributes start with an underscore. That's all. It is not required the same way that the underscores on the init are required because it looks for that. It expects to find a method with that name. That's the only reason it has underscores. So now we have looked at how to read a message. How do we write a message? So we can have the setter, and this has an interesting annotation where we have the setter of that particular property. So we annotate it that way. So we have the getter, and then we kind of link a setter to that property. And that works by having a function like this. So it takes the object, again, we always need the object, and we need to have as parameter the new message. And then we check, is that actually a message that's not none, because we don't set it to an empty value. Then we set the message field to the new message parameter. Yes, so yeah, no super chats, huh? No super chats. No super chats needed. I do get paid for this. I'm much more lucky than those people that have had their jobs cancelled. Maybe they were working in a bar or something like that. Not particularly nice, even though the government is supporting it. Yeah, yeah, yes, yes, yes. No, I'm not going to sell you any VPNs either. So inheritance. So sometimes you have a number of classes that kind of work together about stuff. And that's about inheritance. So you can have a class that kind of takes the functionality of another class. And that is what we use inheritance. So we start out with, okay, we import the class hello from the file hello class.py. That's where we start with. And then we have the class, and we can define a class name hello, where we put in parentheses the variables. And now we can have a constructor that takes two parameters, message and prompt. And because hello, we just seen that, takes one parameter, which is in the constructor, which is the message. So we use this special, not really a function called super. And then we create the super object, and then we call the init function on that with the message. And then obviously we can set the prompt in addition to that. Then we can then create the personalized function that allows that allows asking the user for their name, and then you can hopefully change later on the greetings based upon that name. So when you use this, you can say, okay, what's your name? And then you can say that, and then personalize will ask for this thing, but when we print that, it doesn't do anything at this point yet. Or let me have a quick look. No, say it sets the message or sets the name already with that. So in a personalize, it will say, it will print the message and then add the name. So yes, no, it does work correctly. Again, sometimes reading code is confusing. We'll look at the debugging and how we can do this much easier. So yes, this add thing is when an annotation is kind of to change the way that Python understands what your function is about. So yes, so let me know if there's any particular questions. I'd be happy to do that. Of course, I'm trying to filter out any limitations based upon chat that's going on. So there's also something that you can use in imports. So if you have a module that is runnable, you can also, so if you want to have use a runnable program also as a module, you can use basically a main function, and then in your actual module code you say, okay, if the name of this module is __ main, so it's not actually imported but it's run directly as code, then we call this main function. So this is how you can actually have a module that uses main.